the launch. The launch is going to be comprised of a variety of things, including a panel discussion, because the point here is to see what's the experience of some of our mini-grid developers here in Uganda. So we'll have a panel session. But first, we would also like to all protocol observed, because I know there's very many important people here. We have an MP from Kalangala. We have Mr. David Lowe from the German Embassy. It's really an honor to have you. We have a country director for KSW here. And we also have Mr. David from GIZ, he's also the country director. And to go observe, it's an honor to have you. Speech from Mr. David Lowe, and we'll have a PS coming in. Our also join us. She will give a speech at the time of the launch, so you will forgive us, there was a bit of a change in program. Mr. David Lowe, you're very welcome.
Of course, it's a good morning to the Get Access Uganda project team. Well, thanks a lot, first of all, for inviting me to this launch of the Get Access Mini-Grids project. Well, it's a great honor for me to open this session of this Saturday morning, so thanks a lot for coming. And it's an honor for me to speak to you on behalf of the German government this morning. Well, I'm very glad that Uganda and Germany have such a strong partnership with the energy sector. Energy, as we know, is one of the key factors for development in all countries. Well, energy is the driver for all economic progress. And here in Uganda, with still only the smaller part of the population having access to energy, it is obvious that there's still a lot of work ahead of us. And this year's Energy Week in Manyonyo is, I believe, a great opportunity to give further incentives to that process. And our Get Access program is, I would say, one of the means we have in our toolbox to close the gaps that are still persisting. Well, the development partnership between Germany and Uganda is set off in 1964 with the signing of the first cooperation agreement, and well, our collaboration has over time evolved into a testimony of shared knowledge, experience, and technology. And today, the cooperation between our two countries focuses on renewable energies and energy efficiency, rural development, water and sanitation, and on Uganda's refugee response. And we aim at our principal goal to advance universal access to energy and supporting strong policy frameworks which champion clean energy solutions to civil society. And I would say that Get Access is blending in pretty well into that picture. That program seeks to support private entities in the construction of around 130 solar-powered mini-grids in remotely areas across the country. And these mini-grids will add approximately 5 megawatts of generation capacity to the country. And Get Access is also a great example of joint action from the European side, which is jointly working together for the development of Uganda. The European Union can't be here, unfortunately, but the European Union contributed about 10 million euros to that program. The German government contributed 50 million euros to Get Access. The German Development Bank, KfW, well, of course, is managing these funds, and the Ministry of Energy is responsible for the implementation. Well, as we all know, there are very close linkages between provision of energy, economic development, and climate change. Well, which energy sources we use and how efficiently we use them has an enormous impact not only on people's ability to access energy, but also on our environment and also our climate. Uganda is, as we know, very rich in renewable energy resources. Well, many industrial nations, well, including Germany, envy Uganda for its abundant hydropower and huge potential for solar energy. energy. And I'm very glad that the government of Uganda has decided to build upon it, decided to use these valuable assets and get access. Again, is a great example here to illustrate this. Well, in Germany, we are currently implementing what we call Renweable. This translates into English roughly as energy transition. And well, back in Germany, we are working to overcome our reliance on coal, oil, and nuclear energy towards a low-carbon, nuclear-free economy powered by renewable energy sources. And that is not easy. It's a pretty tough process, but I believe that climate change is giving us no other choice here. But globally, we are vulnerable to the negative impacts of climate change, where we face more and more extreme weather events, we face droughts, and we do face floods. And these will only increase if we do not step up our action now. Well, here in Uganda, Germany is also fostering climate change adaptation and mitigation. Well, we are committed to support Uganda in tackling this global challenge. Well, while contributing, as we all know, only very little to climate change, Uganda is globally one of those countries affected most by it, one of the most vulnerable countries. And in that regard, I believe that it is a very good sign that the German government in 2022, for the first time, spent more than 6 billion euros for climate change adaptation and mitigation in developing and emerging countries. But let me get back to Get Access. Well, this program, I would say, is a great example of where our climate action and our efforts towards universal energy access come together, where they converge. Well, Get Access serves as an important contributor towards Uganda's 100% clean energy access target by 2030. Get Access is also well aligned to Uganda's nationally determined contributions, the NDCs, where the energy sector plays a key role. And well, not least, Get Access is also highlighting the crucial role that the private sector is playing for achieving the targets that the international community set in the Paris Agreement. Well, but tackling climate change for Get Access is only one side of the coin. The clean and the renewable energy the program will bring to rural areas in Uganda will also support local economy development. For example, local SMEs, and especially also women-led enterprises, which is very important to German development cooperation. And in doing so, well, Get Access will help satisfy demand for energy, while at the same time also stimulate economic activities. And this again in turn will contribute to national socio-economic development, but it will also impact positively on people's livelihoods. So we do have two essential goals we need to pursue simultaneously. Climate protection on the one side and energy security on the other side, which is key for economic development. And Get Access is investing in both these pillars by fostering this market for private sector driven and operated mini-grids, as we will hear later, I'm sure. And the idea here is also to position mini-grids as a viable alternative vis-à-vis publicly financed on-grid electrification. But let me also put Get Access into the context of German development cooperation a bit more. As I believe we will also hear later in the panel discussion, GSZ has been, well, our technical cooperation agency has been able to pilot mini-grids in cooperation with the Ministry of Energy, quite successful now. And now KfW, our financial cooperation agency, is coming in to scale up this tested approach through Get Access. And let me also briefly mention our multi-donor Get Fit program that is focusing on hydropower. And Get Fit has employed very similar mechanisms of public-private partnership that Get Access will now also be able to draw on. But to come to an end, to conclude, I would like to thank very much all stakeholders involved in the Get Access program for their support so far, and I'm now very much looking forward to see the program move towards successful implementation. And speaking also beyond programs, speaking beyond Get Access, I believe now more than ever we must invest in sustainable, affordable and accessible energy systems. And this is only, I believe, going to happen with a strong commitment of the private sector. And I do hope that more and more people will realize, will understand that the energy transition offers good business opportunities. And as I said, Get Access here is one of the items we have in our toolbox to tackle this. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Mr. David, for the... actually, I would say Mr. David, though, because we have more than one David here, but thank you very, very much for the very insightful speech. It summarizes what this project is going to achieve in terms of climate change and also the electrification for our people here in Uganda, but it's also going to draw in private sector capital and participation from our local communities. Now I would like to invite the chair for the session, the panel discussion, Mr. Renweable, to just come and stand next to me because he will... Mr. Renweable, for those who don't know him, he played a very major role in the development of this project, and we felt it wise to, who better than Mr. Renweable to take our panelists through this session. And he also is very rich in mini-grids, and he was the manager for renewable energy back at the Electrification Agency. You're very welcome, Mr. Renweable. I would also like to welcome to our panel Ms. Olga Namatovu, who is the head of Pro Mini Grids, if that's the best way I can put it, at the GIZ. She's been very instrumental in the success of the Pro Mini Grids project. At the moment, we have 25 mini grids in Namor, and GIZ was taking lead in implementation of those mini grids, and Ms. Olga has been the major coordinator for those. So I'd like to welcome her to take her seat at the panel. And before Ms. Olga was Mr. Moses Kakoza, who decided to now become a consultant in mini grids. So he's an expert, a seasoned one, and would also like to invite him to the panel. Thank you very much, Mr. Moses. We also want to welcome Mr. Ricardo Ridolfi. Mr. Ricardo, your profile is too big for me to explain, but he's one of our biggest developers here in Uganda, and he has mini grids projects also in other sub-Saharan countries. You're very welcome, Mr. Ricardo, from Equatorial Power. We would like to invite one of our interesting mini grid developers who we know for innovation, Mr. Peter Nyeko, to the panel. He has also a big profile here in Uganda as a mini grid developer. He represents Mandilis Energy, but also he is the co-founder of Mandilis Energy. You're very welcome, Mr. Peter Nyeko. Lastly, I'd like to invite Alex Wanume. Mr. Alex Wanume is the country director for NUT Off-Grid Africa. NUT Off-Grid Africa, for those who don't know, it's total operations of wind energy here in Uganda. And Mr. Alex Wanume has been also really instrumental in the success of mini grids in Uganda through wind energy, because they were the developers for the Pro Mini Grids project in northern Uganda. I'd like to let Mr. Renweable take on the session. Thank you very much.
Good to see you. I haven't been around for like a year, so I've lost touch with most of the people, but I'm glad to be back. And I'll be moderating this session. The panelists have already been introduced. I'll give them a chance to, as part of their discussions, to say more about their companies. I think it's in order. This panel discussion is going to look at scaling up of mini grids and looking at mainly the experience of the mini grid projects that has been carried out in the country, and also those that have mini-grid projects outside the country also give us their experience, describe the projects, their experience, the lessons learned, so that as the GateFeed project takes off, the lessons that have been learned in implementation, in regulation, can be taken on as implementation goes on. So I will, without wasting any time, because we started a bit late, I will give 5 minutes to each panelist to be able to have that discussion. So I will start with Olga. I think I will go through first with the developers, then I will come to the other supporting infrastructure around it. So I will start with Olga, who has been, no, I will not start with Olga. I will start with Alex. Then I will go to Ricardo, and then I will go to Peter. I think Olga will be the last. Alex has been a country manager for the project that was supported by EU and GIZ in the northern area, called the Pro Mini Grid, which I was privileged to also work on when I was at the Rural Education Agency. And this project has gone through, it went through the whole design stage, it went into implementation, and it's now in operation for I think approximately 1 year. So there are lessons to be drawn from this project. So I would like, from the perspective of a developer, Olga will talk about the perspective of the financial.
Where we are now in the operations phase, and we are licensed for 10 years right now. There have been quite a number of lessons that if I was to sit down and read the whole book, and then I will pick up the most important lessons that we have taken, and also what we are going to implement better from our perspective as the developer. One of the biggest changes that has come when it comes to the mini-grid sector has been the technology shift. You know, the Pro Mini-Grid project was released, I think, around 5-6 years back, and at that time, you know, when it comes to the solar sector, that's a very big time to have mini-grids in the solar sector, technology sector especially. Once we tendered for these projects using, for example, lithium, using lead acid batteries. So that's how the projects were set up. But right now, you know, with all the big shift in the technology, for the costs that we had for the lead acid batteries, we now get the considerable, almost comparative cost with lithium-ion technologies. So all the projects that we're going to implement going forward, we're going to be using lithium-ion technology, and that, you know, of course, you know the benefits that that has over the lead acid batteries. Second, it comes, so that means basically overall the capex. We have streamlined the capex costs. We have made sure that they are now much more competitive and more, you know, more suitable for the rural mini-grid sector that we are operating in. Second is the operational, on the operational side. Initially, when we designed these projects, we had a lot of manual interventions that we needed to have. For example, we were going to use agents. In each of the villages, we were going to have an agent who would be responsible for selling the tokens using cash. But now we have implemented a more of an IoT approach, even now, right now, in the mini-grids right now, where we have, first of all, mobile money payments that are being used, so we don't have to have all these agents. You know, with the agent factor, of course, on top of the unreliability of the agent, they may not be there. And there's things like, for example, to do with the theft of cash. Right now, everything has been digitized, and we are now using mobile money payments throughout, which has considerably improved the operations. We are now using remote monitoring more. Initially, when we went to these sites, there was no mobile coverage. It was little or non-existent at all, but right now we have mobile coverage. So we have managed to use IoT. Basically, everything is connected to a central server, and then we are doing the remote monitoring. So, for example, when I'm here, I can monitor and see what's happening in the project's up country. So that is one of the improvements we have had. And also, instead of having a technician in every village, also, which was the initial approach, we now have just 5 technicians who are now looking after all the projects, and it's easy. Once we get a report, an alert that there's an issue with the system here, we dispatch a technician who go and handle it. We have, when we have customer complaints, we now have a more centralized way of approaching the comments. And then also when it comes to on the commercial side of things, that means the PUE. Initially when we designed this project, us as developers, we did not have really a set PUE approach that we're going to use. But right now we've integrated PUE supported by GIZ. The business trainings that have come in, now PUE is part and parcel of our approach when it comes to mini grids. It's the first thing that we emphasize. And lucky enough, this year we were able to mobilize a grant and convert a majority of the diesel mills which were operating in the villages to electric mills. So a big plethora of lessons that we have learned, but just to summarize given the time constraints. Thank you.
Thank you.
I mean, I'll give you a little bit of background because at the end of the day, and I thank Alex for doing all the technical details, which I'd gladly avoid. But you know, energy, especially solar energy, is pretty simple. It's a simple equation, right? You have inputs and outputs, and the tariff is just a function of that. There's no magic, right? The only real magic is what the consumer does. That's the difficult part, and that's where I think we should focus here today. To answer Benen's question, I mean, I'll give you a little bit of an idea of what we do. At Equatorial Power, we focus on demand growth. I mean, at the end of the day, the sizing of the plant, the future growth, and ultimately the economic development of the community, which is arguably why we're all here, depends on how the consumer exploits electricity to gain, right? Not just to turn on a light, but to do much more, to do the whole suite of what electricity can bring. So that's important because we have looked at projects from many different angles. I mean, in Uganda at the time, there was no tenders when we came in. In other countries, we've won tenders from donors, from governments. We've partnered. I think there's not one size fits all in how to go about it. It depends largely on existing regulation. Uganda, I think, has lived a paradox for some time because on the one hand, it is arguably the most sophisticated electricity market in Africa, one of the most in sub-Saharan Africa, right? I also have been sitting on the board of UMEME for 6 years, and I can tell you the regulator does a stellar job. I mean, it's not by chance that ERA has won an award 5 years in a row as the best regulator in Africa. So there's that, and then there's a big access gap, right? And again, it's the same equation. It's a function of how much money goes into electrification. I think everybody followed the fights that the Honourable Minister did on behalf of the whole sector recently. There was 100 billion shillings removed by Parliament on rural electrification budget that Honourable Ruth was able to claw back, right? At the end of the day, it's a function of political will on one hand, which sets regulations and subsidies, whether it's distribution network, that's a subsidy. How much is government going to contribute to buy down that tariff? That's one. Two is the technology and the business model from the developer, which Alex, I think, spoke about valiantly. And then three, it's the actual business model around demand growth, because this is a difficult sector. It's a sector that doesn't work. If you just, many tenders have failed in the past because they come from a different model, which is there's an input, an output, somebody is an off-taker with a PPA or other, and as long as you can make your returns, you make your reasonable return, right? Which remunerates debt, first of all, and then equity. That's failed, right? Why? Because largely, Alex said, technology prices change, but also demand is not there. Demand does not grow as we hope it should. So over the last few years, there's been a shift, right? And I think Get Access is a great example of how BGFAs in the room, there's a few others that have shifted from let's focus only on the electricity component to, which is relatively simple, to let's focus on the usage of that electricity, right? So at Equatorial Power, we've tried to pioneer this over the last 6 years. I mean, we've gone as far as building our own industrial parks where we do water purification, ice making, processing, EVs. At the end of the day, I don't think we should be talking about mini-grids. I think we're talking about integrated, distributed infrastructure. I mean, who cares, right? If I ask you guys, do you really care about electrons? I don't think anybody does, right? You care about what communities benefit from electricity. You care about if a fisherman catches 2 fish and wastes 1 because there's no ice cold storage, and has to sell at the lowest price possible because there's no processing. That's what we care about, right? And that's what unlocks the economic value of a community. So in Uganda, I talk about fishing because we're on islands. We started on the Sesa side, now we're on the other side of the country near Kenya, and we're hoping together with NG, we have a joint venture with NG, so we're trying to, as Alex said, meet scale, because otherwise this doesn't work. But the focus is around how do you support the customer to do more. I launched another company called Energrow that does exactly that. It's appliance financing for any appliance. I mean, you meet customers that can pay $1.20 a kilowatt hour, right? But they don't have cash for a fridge. They don't have cash for a mill, right? Or an electric boda boda. I recognize Ricky, a good friend, who's hopefully going to help us bringing a lot of electric motorcycles to the country. But this is what's needed. You need to enable the customer to leverage the availability of infrastructure. And if you want to do that, so this is one. To touch on another very important point, it's on experience, right? We started early. I think Peter probably even earlier than us, to be fair. It takes time. This is a new model. There's infrastructure. It takes time to get it right? I think GIZ has a lot of lessons learned, and that's why now Get Access is looking as shiny as it looks. And I recognize Moses and the team that was there, right? It's not easy. But one thing we have to remember when we deliberate in comfortable conference centers is that it's an emergency, okay? We spent 6 years talking about a tender and no villages were electrified. In 6 years, a kid goes through primary school with no power. So from the height of our privilege, we have to remember that this is an emergency, and excellent is the enemy of the good. Sometimes you got to get, excuse my French, shit done, right? And kudos to the government of Uganda, to GIZ, and to the EU, because in one way or another, things were getting done. Where we are today is a unique opportunity to finally do this in scale. When I talk to investors, they love our pitch. I think Peter is a conference pro. I think there's nobody better in the world than Peter Nyeko. We're talking about, and we've suffered the same problem. Everybody likes our rhetoric, and then they look at the numbers and they say, oh, okay, well, come back in 10 years when you're actually going to make a buck. Right? So the opportunity today is to finally do something in scale, as Alex said, with the right technology, but I emphasize the right speed, and this comes down to the donors and the government. You have to want to do this fast, because if you want to do everything perfect, we have suffered for the last 10 years, and if you look at just documents of how many villages we wanted to do 10 years ago, they weren't done, right? So at the end of the day, we have to remember what we're here for, and we're here to deliver economic development to communities, so speed matters. If we can together, collectively, show a model that yields decent returns, then we don't need European taxpayers to pay for rural Ugandans. We will have investment, we have NSSF ready to fund, we'll have Ugandans funding Ugandans, right? But we need to prove the model. I think that is our role today. So I went a little bit off topic, but thanks for the opportunity, Benin.
Okay, thank you, Ricardo. I think I'll go to Moses.
Before coming on to that topic, I'll share a bit. So, I did this project with Olga and the team the project took 7 years, yeah? And finally, we only have 25 of the 40, right? So the projects really take a lot of time. And yesterday I was looking at some numbers when we were writing the paper for Get Access, a bit of background about the market. And according to the energy policy, the grid only covers 19% of the population. So that means only 1 out of 5 people has a grid connection. If you've traveled to rural areas, like how we go to Kitgum to see our mini grids, you know that this grid is only available, I would say, the people who we talked to, they told us like 2 to 3 days a day, and that is during daytime. So it's really not that good. Now, I'm not saying that mini grids are better than the grid. I'm just saying there is a big opportunity for mini grids. Of these 58% who are connected to electricity, I think majority, like 38 or so, are powered by solar lanterns. A solar lantern, 1 watt, 2 watt, 5 watt, it just gives you lighting and charging your phone, done. And 38% of our people are covered on that. And unfortunately also the NES is planning to cover 50% of our population with solar lanterns. So even though mini grids are only providing very low, I think it's less than 1% who are being provided by a mini grid, the grid is very slow. It's been around and funded for decades, and it's only 19%. Solar lanterns, I mean, they are great, but they will not provide development. So there's a big, big potential for mini grids. Really, really big. Even this idea of how far should it be and all this, yeah, it's a big opportunity. I mean, they've been around for long. Mini grids are also not new. I think, but also they are not complicated. The technology is there. All the technology is done. I mean, the complex thing is PUE, as you said, Benon. But, I mean, in my perspective, I also don't think PUE is very, very challenging, especially if you are there. PUE is challenging to us who live in Kampala, who live in hotels and all this and have a grid. And so it's just hard for us to conceptualize it. But honestly, when you're in the communities, even before you provide the grid, people are already using generators to run their saloon. People are already providing very expensive services, meals running on diesel and stuff like that, that if you tell them, I guess, I mean, at least I saw it in Lamo. If you tell the people, if I give you a mini grid and I charge you, okay, ERA will not allow, but let's say I charge you $1, will you pay for it and switch? The guy says, yeah, I will. And he will, actually, because it's cheaper, it's more reliable. There is a researcher who was from I think, South Africa. She was doing her PhD, and she went to our mini grids in Lamo. So she stayed in a grid village in Lamo, in a grid village, Palabek, in a hotel there because she needs to have power for her work. In this grid village, I tell you, she told me power went off a lot more. And then she asked the people, isn't there a small guest room in the mini grid village? And she went to Paloga. Paloga is a mini grid village which is powered by those guys, Winch. And she told me this guest room was half the price and the power was basically always there. And she stayed, I mean, she was there for 3 months. I think she stayed in the grid village for like 3 weeks and then she moved to the mini grid village. So it's really possible, it's really clear these things work. I mean, just to come on the productive use, I think maybe what I would do differently is what we did with Pro-Mini Grids is we funded it through AFSI. So AFSI is an NGO, Italian NGO, and they were supporting us with giving out the grants to the communities and trainings and so on. I think what I would do differently now is that I would probably slow it down a bit, so I would not rush with productive use. I would do it long term. The grid always has money for financing them almost every year. They are putting money into the grid. I don't know why there's no money for mini grids. The projects just fund you today, you install your mini grid, they're out, right? And then all of a sudden, you realize, I need to already expand my generation capacity. Oh, I need to blah, blah. And then basically you're out. And actually, mini grid developers, at least I know, it's really challenging to operate a mini grid without a grant, yeah? So I think it would be good to have PUE money running in the long term and taking it slow, running it through financial institutions, running it through developers. Basically, only provide grants when there's somebody who is able to channel that grant and use it in a sustainable way, than doing it very, very short. One last point. I hope I still have.
Your time is over, but I can give you more
because
you have done my job.
Yeah. One last point is I also feel that it's good for us to really be excited about mini grids, like to believe in them and to really champion it. The way these projects come, they don't come from, I don't know. I mean, they don't just come, right? Somebody is there trying to look for money, right? You guys are always doing it. So I think that as Ugandans, and I am a Ugandan, I'm now a consultant on mini grids, I think we should really plug into mini grids, buy into it, promote it, talk about it, visit projects. When you go to the field, don't just visit grid projects, also look at mini grid projects, learn about it. Invest. I mean, maybe we can reach a point where instead of getting money always from outside, maybe we could even do crowdfunding here and so on. I think it's really not it's really not complicated, and it's a big, big opportunity for us as Ugandans, because not so many mini-grids markets are great anyway. So if we just do a few things right, we'll be the best in the world. So I'm convinced about that, and I just wanted to encourage. Thanks, Bernard.
Thank you for the case for mini-grid. It's not just a case about debate. We know the geography of this country. We know where people live. So there is a case for mini-grids within the whole framework of electrification of this country. Peter, no, let me first go to Peter so that you can build up from that. Peter has been looking for money for a long time. I think the time I knew him, he was trying to look for money, moving around. And I just wanted to focus on, you have built mini-grids in the northern part of the country. You have got financing. I don't know whether the government eventually gave you the grid. You will explain that, but I know you are on the program to get a grid on your pilot projects. But you're also building a big portfolio, which is very important to as Ricardo said, to be able to economies of scale, reduce operational costs, and become efficient. So what has been your experience in looking for funds? You know why I'm saying this one is, I remember one time in Nairobi, in Kenya, they had a lot of money in the bank. I think even here there was a project, I will not name who had it, but it had money in the bank, and that money could not be accessed by developers. In Kenya, they had over like $120 million seated there, and it could not be accessed because there's some misalignment between the needs of the developers and the funders. So from your perspective, as you will describe your project that you're doing and your struggle looking for financing, and what do you think the funders, the development partners, the government can do to simplify the processes? Because I always tell people that when they are looking at us as mini-grid people, they want to use the yardstick of doing bujagali to be able to access money. Incidentally, I was in government and I had the rules that I had to follow. But we need to talk these things out so that people in policy, people in regulation can understand the difficulties of these projects. But I'm glad I can see the room is full. That shows that there is interest in mini-grids. So Peter, over to you.
Thank you very much, Benin. Echo from Paluga, that village that he's powering, which has power around the clock. Your friend's probably staying at my cousin's lodge, so thank you for the business. Yeah, I am from Uganda, leading the team at Mandulis Energy. We've been in this space for, this is our 12th year now, so it's been a great journey. We've got one site which has been running for 9 years in Nuya district, and that's commercial and industrial, off-grid facility powering an agriculture industrial park. So that industrial park does the processing of rice, maize, groundnuts, agricultural produce in general. The power is generated mostly through bioenergy, so biomass gasification. And that's been an interesting journey for us, running that facility daily for the last 9 years. It's helped us kind of, prove that it's possible to run a bioenergy system, at a fraction of the size of Kakira, which is the big one on the grid. I think probably close to 10% of the grid is powered by bioenergy or more. So on our side, we see bioenergy as an important player in the off-grid space. We've got a mini-grid which is running and powering a community in Gotngu in Nuya district. It's been running for 2 years now. It was licensed by ERA, and we work closely with RIA to locate the area and get started. So what's interesting there is it's a hybrid mini-grid. So solar, PV, and biomass gasification in hybrid, and very little battery storage. So our total battery storage is probably not more than 2 hours of total generation capacity. But what that basically means is we're able to bring the storage costs really low because our big battery is a warehouse full of agricultural waste. And having a pellet mill there to process that waste into something that can be stored for the whole year round or until the next harvest season becomes a lot cheaper than having a whole big battery bank in place. It's been great. We've been running on a tariff of 26 cents a kilowatt hour. Our approach to productive use of energy has been twofold. On one side, investing through our subsidiary Repal into water processing facility, a pellet mill, an ag processing facility. But at the same time, for the first year and a half, basically, we supplied electricity to that community at no cost. It was a risk, but it was a case of trying something out. What if we don't have a grant to give them? What can we give them? We can give them the opportunity to save what they would have paid us and spend it to buy productive use equipment. In the 2 years we've been running, we've had to scale up production. There's, if I look at the total number of connections we have in that village, there's more than 40 businesses that have sprung up. And all that it is whatever they would have paid for a year and a half, they actually saved it and invested it in mills, in hairdressing salons, and it's really buzzing. There's even a hotel there. So it's really helped us kind of gather the information we need to feed into the studies that we've completed on the 24 locations we hope to be scaling up into in Uganda. And also to realize that the ideal size, as Ricardo said earlier, is not too small. You've got to be close to somewhere where the economies make sense. And we've realized that 500 kilowatts is ideal for us, because at 500 kilowatts, with a ratio of more than half the electricity going to productive use, you're able to manage your productive use costs, and you're able to actually deliver the electricity at a tariff that people can afford, and you're able to get it all done, even if you don't get a grid. We didn't get a grid built for us by anyone, but we got a 20-year contract, and that's what we needed to go to bankers and say, bankers, lend us money. We have 20 years, and and we'll figure out how to make it work. It has been easy. Cash flow is a nightmare, but having a different system which doesn't only rely on one technology is crucial. Innovation, and that's kind of where the big challenge on the financing has been. Every time we've gone to anyone who is in the impact space within this sector, they've always told us, why don't you only do solar? I said, well, I'm an aerospace engineer. I spent half my life, working on solar projects that are currently going to Mars and beyond. I understand solar, but I also know that I'm in a village in Uganda, and I've got to figure out how to bring the cost of electricity as low as possible in case that funding doesn't come in. And so it helps to be given the freedom to innovate. As long as one can ensure that the quality of electricity is grid quality, that the price of electricity is as close to grid as possible, and that the uptime is all through. But we've realized that box checking with financial institutions is never easy. And so we've had to do it the long way and to become a 12-year overnight success. But it's helped us go beyond Uganda's borders. We're developing plants now at similar scales of 500 kilowatts plus in other parts of Africa. And that's quite exciting, because they all come in, see what we're doing, and we're looking forward to kind of scaling. And we're really glad and happy to share our experiences with those who are developing projects, especially when it comes to productive use of energy, when it comes to how bioenergy can help, give you additional incomes, even if you don't, buy mills and so on and so forth. Bioenergy gives out, slurry and biochar, which works as a fertilizer, brings in an income. So suddenly your generating asset is generating your incomes beyond that. For those households beyond the grid, electric vehicles, battery swap systems, battery-powered, ready boards through inverters have helped us even get them on the same tariff. And so that allows us to go within the mini-grid and beyond the mini-grid. And it's been great. you're all welcome to come visit whenever you'd wish to, and happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. One more panel. Olga, tell us, because we did together with this project, and it took a very long time. What can we do, in your opinion, really, just honestly, what can we do to simplify and move quickly? People need electricity yesterday or last year. Then after that one, I'll go to the audience and get a few questions.
Very big question for me to answer, in my opinion. But maybe I'll share a bit from the experience we have had implementing the pilot that everyone has already talked about with the 25 mini-grids we have. This we have done together with government of Uganda, with formerly REA, the ministry, and also the Electricity Regulatory Authority that have been involved in the design and the actual implementation of the project. So we have actually drawn lessons, and we have learned. We have had the developers, we have gotten the feedback, and we have learned. So maybe to share, the question was, why are these tenders taking so long? And what is government learning, and what are they doing to improve? So one of the things I'll mention is that we do recognize that these long development project phases really take a toll on the developer financially as well. It doesn't make sense to have a project for 6 years and 4 years for developing the project and designing it. We do recognize that, and it's a lesson we have picked up. And together with the ministry, we are already seeing some efficiencies. The critical points that are causing delays in this process, I would say, are the whole tender procurement process, the contract approval processes, and negotiations with developers. These are the two main processes that are really causing delays. The third area here causing delays in this development phase is financial close. And thank God we have some private investors here and also the developers here. So maybe to elaborate a bit, when it comes to procurement and tender processes, the inefficiencies there we have recognized together with the ministry, and we have seen some improvements. So with Get Access, we are looking forward to see how the ministry has actually taken up these lessons and integrated within their procurement departments, how we can make these timelines as short as possible. I cannot speak for the ministry right now, but I know for sure that they have taken these lessons, and we are hoping to see a shorter, actually, implementation time frame for the Get Access tender. Yeah. The other thing I would talk about is the financing. So while we want to kick off projects in time, we have also recognized that actually securing financial close for these projects, equity financing, takes long. While government is ready with their concessional grants, the contracts are ready, we also recognize that it takes the developers some time to also secure financing in a way. This could be maybe a call to action that while we are designing these projects, to already also involve the investors behind these projects. We normally deal with the developers themselves, but at the back end, while we go through these long contract negotiation processes, at the end of the day, we need financial close. And the investor just complicates the whole financial close processes. We go back into due diligences again that need to happen, and then they're asking for contract revisions. This clause doesn't make sense, we need this to be adjusted. So one of the lessons is we need to pull in more investors in these discussions. I don't know if there's some in the room, but at the point of designing the projects, let's have the investors already on board. And the other point I'll talk about still on contract approvals. We have had very long negotiation periods, particularly on the tariff. It all zeroes down on the tariff, like Ricardo also already mentioned. Era was supposed to be on this panel, but it would also help to have a tariff cap for mini-grids, I would say, a uniform tariff across mini-grids. So it reduces a bit on the pressure on our side, but as financials, but also the contract negotiations that are coming, determining which level of subsidy that makes sense. For example, we have a tender that went out on price per kilowatt, and developers did submit proposals at $60 and above per kilowatt hour. We all know communities cannot afford this power. Exactly, yeah. So this is what it will actually cost to make this project, so implement mini-grids in these villages. But while they're submitting these financial offers, they also know the communities will not be able to afford this. But also the government already knows what an applicable or approvable tariff for these mini-grids would be in the villages. So if this is communicated, it would make the whole project design a bit more easier and also reduce the negotiation processes. So particularly in that regard, for me, those would be the three areas that are causing a lot of delays and making this whole development phase of the projects very long. If we can have more clear clear processes or rules regarding these 3 points, then that would, and everyone, the different stakeholders working on these different areas on board at the point of designing the project, it will reduce the time of designing or packaging the project as much as possible. The other thing I would talk about, if I still have time,
I want to go to the audience, but I'll give you one minute. You're the only lady there, so I will be very...
Thank you. Thank you. So the one thing I'll talk about also is really data sharing. So developers, you're asking government and development partners to improve here and there and do this. But for us to really understand the market and help shape these financial instruments better, we need data. You are not sharing data. Exactly. So it becomes difficult, especially if we are implementing public funds, for example. You know, we have to be transparent in a way. That's how we do these tenders. We recognize, but if we're implementing taxpayers' money, definitely we need to be transparent about the way we do things. You have projects funded by public taxpayers' money, you're not willing to share data on your business models. If we want this market to grow, and you want government to actually, you want regulations to improve, you want to see efficiencies in these procurements and the way things are done, we need data, we need to access your internal business models to be able to do that. I'll stop there, thank you.
Thank you. Ricardo, I'll give you a chance later. Let me first go to the audience. The good thing is that, but they are all here listening, so I'm thinking they are taking on. I think the regulator has done a great job. He has been part of us as we develop projects. This was the first project that they are talking about, the Pro Mini Grid. There was no justification to put up a tariff. You know, some of these things have consequences, but when you are not there, you don't know the consequences of your decisions as a public officer. But I think I'm have a feeling that every one of us has learned. So the project, as it kicks out, I think it's very important to have that tariff published so that we know we are going to provide subsidies. And then it's used as, it makes life much easier when the developers are quoting their costs against a set tariff that will be charged. Now, let me go to the audience. I have a few minutes. I see my manager is standing up. So, questions, let me start from behind. 1, 2. I'll get, no, behind. I want to start from behind. And the lady, so you will say your name, what you do, you say your question, and then if you want it direct to a specific person, then you direct it. And let it be focused on the agenda of mini grids. I don't want to hear the grid and Bujagali and Karuma and all those things. No, let us focus it on this one.
Thank you.
I'll come to you after that.
Thank you, Benon.
Yeah.
The instructions are very clear. My name is Job Mutiaba. I am an energy consultant. Previously, I've worked in Uganda with CEDA, and I've also worked with the International Renewable Energy Agency, where I'm still consulting. And mine is more of a comment and a challenge to the panelists. The first is risky. So the negotiations take forever, and the debt equity arrangements tend to be very skewed. If you compare mini grids to other, energy projects, you have 20-80 or 90-10 kind of ratios, and mini grids are talking about equity of 30, 40, 50%. That's very high. That becomes a very costly kind of project, and that is going to be shown also in the tariff. That's how you get the tariffs of 60 cents on a kilowatt. So if we can de-risk the projects from the onset, if there are if the development partners, if government, if other entities can come on board early enough in projects and de-risk them to the point that we have tariffs which are going to be meaningful to the final consumer. That's one. The second is about scale. We are dealing with mini grids. I think the biggest number I'm hearing is about 25. At that rate, most of international finance is not yet interested because they are dealing with $10 million, $20 million projects. International finance are looking at $50, $100 million projects. I've been on projects elsewhere where we are dealing with 100 mini grids in one package. How can we get to that point? Because the smaller the packages that we have, the more expensive it gets. We need to raise the ambition. We need to get to that point where mini grids are at least 100 million. That's one transaction. Then we'll have financing, which is cheaper, and it will bring down the cost of mini grids. It is going to bring down the tariff, and everyone is going to benefit a bit faster.
Cross-cutting issues. First of all, thank you, Sumaya. Please, let's remember results-based financing, RBF, okay? Hold that word. Madam Professor, I read recently that we're looking at a mini-grid potential in the next 20 years between 500 billion and 1 trillion. Your question is a $1 trillion question, okay? It's very difficult. Now, in our experience, finding, which fits into de-risking, what models, what niche, economic niches can you work towards unlocking? In fact, we've got a working group on that. We'd love your support. Makerere, please come and help us. It's difficult. It changes from place to place. There's rice businesses, fishing value chains. It's about identifying value chains, and what we've learned is it's insufficient to support locally. Ultimately, you have to support the net export from the local area to wherever the markets are. Right? That's the difficult part. So we definitely need your help. And that certainly de-risks. Now about scale very quickly, you can have scale in two ways, right? Big lots, 100 mini grids plus. This is great, get access, great. But you can also have scale in predictability, meaning, and this is to touch some of Olga's very important points, right? First of all, on data, real quick, we're part of AMDA. I can't speak for all developers, but the CEO of AMDA should be here. We share data on everything. It's all 100% public. So if you talk to AMDA, they'll give you all the data. I share with the regulator. We share all our data, number one. Number two, on the difficulties in procurement, I think that's not new, right? Any government in the world has difficulties in procurement. There are many ways governments can procure, including rolling results-based financing. Now, when you look at financial close, you're absolutely right. It's difficult, right? So I'm not saying that there's one silver bullet, right? There's a number of bullets, and we have to use all of them. When you adopt results-based financing, which the UN does through Sustainable Energy for All, the World Bank does, and many of the donors, including GIZ, has done in the past, right, successfully. And to answer from a friend from BGFA, I mean, results-based financing means that you have a preliminary screening, okay? So you're procuring, you're asking developers to meet certain requirements, and you approve or don't approve. After which, you've allocated areas that they go and do their own studies, because with all due respect to donors, developers don't use your studies, okay? We go and do our own studies. Our investors don't want to use your studies. So that's wasted money, that's wasted time. Results-based financing means that if we don't have the money, we cannot build the project, and you will not give us the money. So in DRC right now, we've got about 25 million worth of projects that are beginning next year, and it was a bit of a race. It was like, look, limited funds, developers come, qualify, and the first to have money get the funds. And that's a way to go fast, because it would be ridiculous for me to say, let's be fast, and then I hold up the process because I don't have funding. But RBF removes that. So it's something that you should consider, because I think if we all were a little bit more humble, we realize we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can learn from our neighbors, copy-paste, and do things that work, right? So I think I'll stop there. There's a lot more to say, but I want to let Peter have a chance as well.
You have become the chair now. Okay, Peter, you can go ahead then.
Awesome, fantastic. Thank you, Ricardo, and thank you, Brandon. I'm gonna. What does it look like out there? So you've got to think about it this way. You know, in this country, you've got an open market. So the people in rural areas and people in urban areas, people close to the grid. So if someone's close to the grid and got a mill, they're probably going to pay 13 cents a kilowatt hour. Now, what can we do to figure out how to make sure we can deliver similar kind of tariffs in a rural area? Because they're all milling the same maize, the same rice. So even if you give them a facility to do the processing, if you can't figure out how to bring that tariff down to the same 13 cents, they'll be selling their rice to the same buyer in the city at 3-4 times more, which means the market won't really happen there. So it's a case of looking at the whole perspective. And if I link back to Job's question on de-risking, There are a few interesting things that we can look at that can help with the de-risking. There is looking at how the technologies we use could help de-risk, and there's also in looking at an opportunity from the climate financing side. And with regards to technology, if your output from your process can be sold. Right now, if we look at the large bioenergy producers in Uganda, the sugarcane guys, they sell byproducts, which, such as ethanol, for example, such as even the fly ash, which comes out. So if what comes out of your process can be sold to someone who's more bankable than a household, then I've found, first case of experience that if the person buying my fly ash or my biochar is an institution with a higher credit rating, my interest rates will drop when I'm borrowing, as opposed to when my only buyers are people who need to be charged less. So figuring out how we can kind of blend the approach and have, like not a single tariff only, but an industrial tariff for mini grids, maybe a non-industrial tariff for mini grids, that might be an interesting one there. But definitely that leads to climate financing as well, and there are opportunities there. Thank you.
Okay, let us go to Alex.
I think I'll just tackle the question on PUE. I just wanted to provide some sort of context to PUE. PUE is not actually a magic bullet. That we have a budget for PUE, so we expect that once we implement PUE, within 1 year we are going to reach our targets in terms of sales. No, PUE is a process, and I think Moses said it best when he said that PUE is not something that you should rush at the beginning of the project, because you need time to study the area, you need time to study the characteristics, you need time to understand the socio-economic setup of the area before you can implement the PUE properly. I mean, yes, you can have these studies done beforehand, but there's, especially for us mini-grid developers, you find that there's always a very big difference between your studies. I mean, it has been mentioned, especially when you come to the expectation. You can work out your studies, produce a very feasible report, but once you start the implementation, you find that there are very big gaps, maybe 50% of what you expected is not going to work. So that's the same thing with PUE. And I always tell people that for me, PUE, the biggest advantage about it is not that it's providing the equipment, providing the, what the appliances that the customers need, but it's actually the training, the business training that you're inputting into these people, into the communities, that they can know that, okay, so I can use the electricity to do this and this productive. Even if you're going to put refrigerators and TVs today in all the households and all the businesses, you're not going to experience 100% magical shift into the consumption. So it's a process that you need to take slowly, and make sure that you understand the setup of the community before you implement, because the communities are different. I mean, in the north, we're looking at milling, which is the biggest economic activity there. So we implemented the PUE around milling. Then we're looking at Bunjako, which is an island, a fishing village. So we're implementing PUE around fishing. So you have to understand the setup of the communities before you can implement them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think I'll go to Olga. You also need to answer something about, I don't know whether I should give it to you, de-risking, but there's capacity.
In terms of de-risking, I must say the Prime Minister project sets a good example for the sector, honestly. We have, and the ministry, also from this pilot, the ministry shows that they have learned. When you look at the way the Get Access project has been designed, we are seeing bigger ticket sizes. We are speaking 100 mini-grids and above to 150. That's really good. And also, we are also seeing longer concessions. Prime mini-grids, we had 10 years. Government has been open to 20 years for the Get Access project. So it shows that lessons are being learned here. And also, more broadly, the licensing around the project, mini-grids, I think from the developers here, there is no complaint about licensing so far I've had, which means we are taking the notes and we are improving. The licensing process is very clear. And also, from the way the Prime Minister's project was packaged, the concessional financing behind the project with the connection subsidies provided up to the last mile, that is further de-risking the project. We have CAPEX subsidies also being provided on top of that. There is also a productive use grant that was also provided on top of that, where we have to take more lessons and listen more to development partners. With more data into your PE business models, we are willing to do this. Around the data, Ricardo mentioned this data is being shared under AMDA. My understanding with AMDA, this is restricted to access to this data is restricted to members only. I don't know if anyone else is receiving this data, but at least we have not. I've tried, and this was restricted to members only, of which I'm not a
member. I'm sure the regulator has taken note of the data issue.
Yeah. Then the last comment on procurement processes and capacity. Yes, we are taking notes. We already have a project under the Get Access tender that is looking particularly on capacity. Get Transform is supporting that, specifically with the ministry. But also to mention, this was the first pilot. We have taken lessons learned, and we are willing to improve. And also to mention that now we have these templates. We have clear processes now developed. We know what it takes and how much time it should take. The templates available, the contracts are now clear. We are watching the ministry this time around to really see how these lessons are being implemented. And probably someone from the ministry will comment particularly on this because it's very important. Whether we shall see more efficiencies in this procurement this time around.
Okay, thank you. Moses. I don't know what you want to tackle.
Yeah, I'm a consultant, and I have seen the difference we can make, anyone can make when you just do your part. So there's a thinking of government should do this, I don't know, donors should do this or so, but I think we should ask ourselves, what can I do to make the mini-grid sector a better place? And one of the thoughts I had today is, instead of this being a conference which we talk, clap, finish, and go home and wait for next year, what if we could have a few action points? I don't know who is then responsible. I'm happy to document them. But we could have a few action points, like, I don't know, there's no mini-grid strategy. We are all working on piecemeal so. What if we just set up a small, it can even be 2 pages, it doesn't have to be 100 pages of a strategy if there's nobody to pay for it, but at least we can start writing down points about how do we want to develop the sector better, what do we need to put in place. RBFs, it's not new, it's talked about all the time. 7 years ago we talked about RBFs, there's still no RBF for mini-grids in Uganda. It's because we do not take the next small steps to do something. So for me, really, that is my last part. Maybe it's, I don't know if it's something we could really do. Another idea could be to just have a quarterly call with the developers and the people. Again, nobody needs to pay for this. We don't need a grant to have a 1-hour call. But we could slowly get things better. Otherwise, we will be here next year on the same points. Thanks a lot, Benon, and thanks a lot to everyone for this opportunity.
Thank you, Moses. I am not going to repeat what they have said. I'm glad that I restricted my opinion to myself because I was just the chair. I want to thank the organizers. I want to thank Adela for giving me even extra time. I want to thank my panelists for ably addressing the questions, sharing their experience, and I'm sure the next projects will pick a lot of these lessons. I hope someone from the Secretariat was recording. They will pick these lessons so that we get better. We have to understand that the Pro Mini-Grid was the first project that was done through a reverse auction method and going through all the bureaucracies that you can think about, both on the donor and on the government. For example, the feasibility study. I'm in government. I was in government. I also question this, but you won't get funding unless you have a feasibility study. So, from the donors will not get money unless they have a feasibility study. So it's a very complicated process. So for me, what's been on both sides, I can understand some of this. So, but thank you for being patient with us. And I wish you a good launch and the deliberations of the next sessions. Thank you.
done a better job without our project management unit that we'll later introduce, as well as our superiors. PS will be joining us later, the minister and my commissioners. It's never a complete circuit without the teamwork, so we really appreciate everyone who is here and who is here to teach us what they've learned and what we can do better as the project is still in the inception stage. I would also like to thank the German government and the EU for the support that they've given us, as well as KFW, in making this project a success to this point. And yeah, I'll just get started, just taking us through what the project is about, and hopefully we'll have some good feedback after that. So the Get Access Ugandan program is basically a mini-grids program that is financed by the European Union and the German government through KFW and the government of Uganda. We're going to take you through basically what a short mini-grid sector overview, because our panelists said it all, and just get right into the program objectives and the funding structure, the site selection, and yeah, the table of contents is on there. First, with the overview of the mini-grid sectors, we have over 46 mini-grids that are currently installed in until 2023. The off-grid electrification rate at the moment is 38%, but mini-grids only contribute 1% to this. So you can see that there's a lot of work to be done in the mini-grid sector. From our current rural electrification master plan for mini-grids, we have just over 500 mini-grids that have the potential for development. And in the country, we have only 11 licensed developers. And that's just the profile to show that Winch Energy has 27, Sagewood. We also have some sites that are operated by the communities. Equatorial Power is here presenting, Pamoja Energy, Mandulis I know, and the other developers have some upcoming sites as well, but this is what we have with them at the moment. CREX. So it's a mixture of private sector and also community-based mini-grids. So we've had over the years mini-grid increasing interest from the private sector. We still have, as you saw, just 11 licensed developers, but we have increasing interest from the private sector from all over the world interested in developing mini-grids here in Uganda. And we also have a portfolio for productive use. Some of the companies were able to capture AVSI and Energo, but honestly, there are really many for productive use, and they're ready to work. We also have some developers starting to pioneer rural industrialization business models, in addition to the basic electricity scales. I think Victoria Power is here talking about what they're doing, the productive use hub. Alex mentioned some of the productive use initiatives and investments they're doing in productive use for the mini-grids in the mall. So it's becoming an increasingly interesting topic that is ready to scale. And from the government side, we have, of course, some incentives that we offer to make the projects more cost-effective and affordable to the people. So we offer support for like the distribution grid, the end-user connection, and we also have policies in place to attract more investors, like the Energy Policy 2023, and also the regulator has been doing a really good job in let's say, the mini-grid, isolated mini-grid regulations, among other things. Sorry about that. So this program in particular was just aims to create an orderly, regulated market for private sector financed mini-grids as the viable alternative to publicly financed grid electrification in remote areas, but also aims to improve clean energy access in rural areas because it's going to be solar-based. So we're looking at climate change adaptation as a means for scaling mini-grids in Uganda. The total program cost is going to be 35 million, but we're getting financing, part of that financing from the European Union and German government through KFW. The government of Uganda is also contributing 5 million, like as I mentioned, subsidize the project through end-user connections. And the private sector will contribute about 5. So basically, it's going to be an 80%, 20% equation where the 80% comes from the government, KFW, and then the rest comes from the private sector, which is the 20%. So I'll invite the next presenter, Prince.
You are doing a wonderful job. Thank you so much. And now, the person that I'm inviting, I don't know if I'm in the right shoes to really even do, but for formalities, please bear with me. He is a university lecturer at Uganda's premier university, Makerere. He is a senior manager and advisor with Multiconsult, Norway. He is the country lead in the implementation of Get Access on behalf of Multiconsult, and he was also involved in the conceptualization of the program from pre-feasibility to current implementation. This gentleman has also helped spearhead the Get Fit project before, and he has worked tremendously with this sector for a very long time. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome with me Dr. Jeffrey Bakabulindi. Yes. Thank you very much.
And going into some of the details regarding this Get Access program. So the whole concept of Get Access is to have a clustered mini-grid approach, similar to what we had in Pro mini-grids. And the way that we selected the clusters for the sites that will be in Get Access, we started from the Rural Electrification Master Plan back in 2019, developed by REA. And at the time, they had identified about 625 mini-grids in the country. And our job was to create clusters that were viable for implementation in this program. And we used some criteria to create the clusters. And we excluded sites with villages that had less than 75 connection potential. We took out those that were close, less than 5 kilometers from the grid. And yeah, so we used a lot of criteria to sort of break down and come down to what we eventually landed on. Where is the pointer? Adela? Yeah, so if you look at the pointer cannot reach there, but this is the entire landscape of mini-grid sites that were identified in the master plan. And eventually, when we ended up with about a short list of 18 clusters from that 625. And of course, we had to use geographic criteria. They shouldn't be too far apart. So the range of distance between a cluster is about 25 kilometers. Beyond that, you lose the economies of scale that we are after, because you're just driving too long to maintain the cluster. And then eventually, what we had in the end was a group of 4 clusters out of the many across the country. And we basically were looking at in the north. The north was prioritized, of course, because of, and we had these refugee settlements and host communities. And we had two areas. First, the Palarinia refugee settlement and the Margi settlement in Adjumani. We bundled this up into one big cluster for consideration under this program. And then we had the islands in Kalangala district. So we go down there at the bottom in the Lake Victoria. We have many islands. We have a big one there called Bugala that's already electrified, but we're looking at the ones that are around. There are many. No electricity, lots of people living there. So we included that cluster in this program as well. We also had another one on Buvuma Island. That entire island is huge. Also has no electricity and so many villages. So that's another cluster that we have included here. And then finally, we have a cluster around Lake Albert in the west. And those are shore sites, landing sites along the lake that we have put together in the final cluster. Eventually, each of those clusters has about 23 to 50 villages altogether. And ultimately, we're looking at electrifying 100 to 150 villages under this program. The number to be clarified closer to the RFP phase of the program, because we'll take people out in the field to verify all the sites before we launch the actual tender. And 20,000 to 30,000 connections are what we are looking at to achieve under this program. So in this case, we are looking at the technology selection that we considered for this is really solar PV. Bidders and developers will have freedom of choice when it comes to the solutions that they choose in terms of metering and inverters, storage. The best case is really considering a ground-mounted solar PV and battery storage system. They still have choice on the battery type, but it's likely going to be lithium-ion, depending. There's likely to be a diesel generator backup system, optional, but it's limited to producing about 15% of the annual production from the mini-grid. If you do have a diesel genset, we expect to have smart metering, but we have some technologies that are not included, so wind and hydro and biomass are not included under this tender. And the LV network has to be built according to the grid code, because eventually the grid may arrive, and this is particularly important for the mini-grids that will be on the mainland. I think there might be some flexibility for the island mini-grids, where the grid may never come. So supply has to be 24 hours a day. The productive use of energy we have a budget for this under the Get Access program, about 3 million euros. And it's a critical aspect of the program to be included. We shall have a consultant who will implement this across all the clusters. And we shall have multiple types of grants and loans offered to households and businesses. And the scope for input and collaboration with other agencies is welcome, who have already implemented some of these PUE activities. The program is going to be guided by the regulatory guidelines that have been developed by the regulator, ERA. This is already known to you. I won't go into details here. There's going to be there's still some discussion on the concession period, 10 years, 15 years, or 15 years and 20 years. So the islands will get a longer concession period, 15 to 20 years, and the mainland will have 10 to 15 years of concession for the mini-grid developers. So environmental aspects are key. Developers will have to comply with international IFC standards as required by the donors, and a lot of the other aspects will be covered in the tender documents that will be launched later during the implementation of the program. So the tariff and subsidy approach that we are considering, we have a tariff cap already for the program and the mini-grid sites. It's about 29 cents, and that's already been agreed in writing with the regulator. The subsidy approach, we consider 3 scenarios. The first one is to subsidize the capital investment. The second one was to subsidize the connections. And then the third was to top up the tariff that consumers would pay to developers. And eventually, after a qualitative and quantitative analysis, we saw that the best approach for subsidy under this program would be the capital-based grant financing. So we want to have a tariff top-up, and the connections will also be subsidized by the government, but the program will cover the capital grant for the developers and subsidy for that. So developers will therefore have to submit their bids based on a fixed capital subsidy. So since the tariff is fixed, the bids are really going to be based on how big a tariff the developers require. So the less the tariff, the more likely the bidder will be awarded. But it's really not like a pro-mini goods. It was a bid based on the tariff. So the one who had the lowest tariff had a better chance of winning. In this case, since the tariff is already fixed by the regulator, they are really bidding on the capital subsidy required for their project. So a bit of a difference there. yeah, so the subsidy payments will be made by the donor agencies through KFW. Government is also going to make the contribution there. And these connections have to be verified independently. There will be another consultant for monitoring and verification. And yeah, so the whole thing is to allow developers recoup their capital expenditure. Right, so this diagram that I'm sharing on the screen is tentative. It may change at the point of RFP, but I include it here because we are interested in getting an idea and some feedback on how the subsidies will be disbursed. So essentially, what we are going to have is that after the award of the tender to the winning bidders, we shall have the bidders will get into achievement of financial close, and they also have to have a subcontract for the development of the distribution grid. So in this case, the developers will build the distribution grids themselves, the low voltage distribution grids. I think previously the government was doing this for developers. I think the key difference here is that even though the developers will build the grid, the money will actually come from the program. But the supervision of the construction of the grid is done by the developers. So that means that once the award has been given and they have a contract with a construction contractor, they will receive 20% of the subsidy amount to assist in facilitating the construction of the grid. So no money really out of pocket necessarily. It's going to come straight through from the program. And then the other payment will be happening at the end of year 0. And here we're assuming that developers can build the grids within a period of 1 year, or at least achieve 90% construction of the mini grids. And once they achieve 90% of those mini grids in the cluster of 25 to 50 sites, they then can receive the other 20% of the capital subsidy payment. And then after 2 years of successful operation, and they have connected about 50% of the required or anticipated connections under the cluster, they'll get the other 20%. And in the 3rd or 4th year, they will be reimbursed for connections that they will have made during the 3rd and the 4th year. And then finally, 30% of the subsidy will be paid at the end of year 4, when they've had 4 years of successful operations and they are almost approaching 100% of connections that were anticipated under the clusters that were envisaged. So that's the planned capital subsidy payment schedule based on the milestones that the developers will achieve during the first 4 years. The financing for mini-grid developers. There is no prescription on how developers can finance their operations or capital investments. We know that there are some specialist financiers like REP, Sunfunder. There's an instrument that was developed under this program by the European Union. It's broader than Get Access, but it's available for developers who are interested in receiving this kind of financing as part of the Get Access program. It's called Electrify Uganda. It was developed in partnership with the EU delegation, and it operates a country window for Uganda. And it has a budget of 5 million euros that's available for on lending. So it will help the financing of new off-grid connections and also support productive use under this program. And therefore, that program aims to support newly built mini-grids that are already built and distribution of productive use appliances in remote rural communities. So the instruments include equity, quasi-equity, junior and senior debt. You're looking at also corporate and project level financing. If you're looking at so many projects, the ticket size is really from 500,000 euros to 10 million euros in terms of investment amount for the project that you're looking to invest. but ultimately the Electrify will finance 50% of the project cost, so up to 5 million euros. The currency for the financing is going to be in euro, US dollars, as well as local currency, which is a bit of a game changer in this case because most of the loan financing that we've had for investments in this space has largely been in foreign currency. So here we have an opportunity to get financing also in Uganda shillings. So I've included the contacts there. If you need to reach out as a developer or investor, you can do that. Oh. Oh my God, sorry. Yeah, that was Electrify. Yeah, so there we are. The previous one was nothing much. Good. Now let's go into the. Okay. Oh yeah, sure. You can take a picture of that. Sorry about that. Yeah, you can reach out at the bottom. I think we'll figure out a way to disseminate this information after this workshop as well to everyone. Good. Now, in terms of okay, could you help us with the next slide, please? Because the clicker, hello, it's stuck also. Okay, good. While that's being fixed, I think we can proceed. Although the next part of the presentation is really very visual, but no problem. We have a program structure for Get Access. And here we have an overarching steering committee at the top. That's going to be comprised of the donor agencies, so the governments of Europe, well, the European Union and the government of Germany. And we also have KfW, who are the fund managers of the implementing agency, basically of this for the program. We shall have the Electricity Regulatory Authority. We shall have the Ministry of Energy as part of the steering committee. We then have a procurement consultant who is multi-consult that I am representing now. And the procurement consultant is going to run and prepare the tender for the procurement of the investors and developers to build all of these mini-grid sites. We have under the ministry a project management unit where we have Adela and her team. And these are the ones who are involved or responsible for the overall program coordination. And then we have the evaluation committee, which will be comprised of sector agencies like ERA, MEMD, to receive and evaluate the bids with the support of the procurement consultant. And ultimately, we shall have a monitoring and implementation consultant who will be supporting the project management unit in construction supervision, technical assistance, and monitoring, payments, and verification. Okay, let's talk about the tender process right now. I think we are conversant, and this has been mentioned during the panel, that there is this is a pain point. It's a point of delay that can happen. I can't promise that it will be quicker now, but we'll do everything that we can to expedite the procurement process. It will be an international competitive tender with pre-qualification in accordance with the laws of the government of Uganda and KfW procurement guidelines as well. Developers will have to have previous experience in mini-grid development. The program is not looking to attract EPC contractors or technology providers. So people who are selling solar panels as a business may not necessarily qualify. So it's really the developers who have built them and maybe operated them as well. The bidders will bid, like I mentioned before, for a minimum subsidy amount in US dollars per cluster based on a fixed tariff of 29 US cents. The selected bidders will be responsible for securing all construction and initial working capital in the best case, and then get refunded or paid as they achieve the milestones that I talked about earlier. So the timelines for that process are here. It's a bit of a busy slide, but in summary, we have the
we need to extend power, we need to give power to these people, and that's it. Because in the long run, my thinking would be that we need to be thinking as a businessman or as an investor. That let's get this money, put it here, and then this is what we shall have.
Thank you very much. I didn't get your name though.
Mentioned is that for you to participate in this bidding, you must have experience in mini-grid development. And we keep talking about capacity building. How then do these local companies that don't have capacity in mini-grid development get started if the opportunity to get started is not being availed to them to get started? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Masendi.
And I'm wondering what company existing in Uganda today, like a local company, is able to carry the capex, like 40, 60, 80% of that capex for 5 years? Where are they going to get the financing to do that? Because we know local banks are 25%, and it's really difficult for local companies to get foreign investment. So I was just curious, like, how are they going to get this money, and where are they going to get it from? And or is this really intended for the big, like the Angis who can get their low cost financing from Europe? So I was just curious about the business model and who this was targeting and how it was actually intended to work. And I hope it's a good answer. Yeah, but maybe someone can just explain how those are all going to come together.
Thank you so much.
I don't know who sat down and selected those villages. Because I have 52 islands, and those I see as most demanding are actually not on the list, without sounding political at all. They are not. But I know the coverage. I know how many households are in an area. And I'm also, apart from being a politician, I'm also an economist. So I know where return on investment is actually higher. If it was in terms of establishing ice plants, I know where they are doing more fishing and where demand is higher. Then the other issue is, what was the basis? Because in the presentation I saw it will be 100 to 150 households, if I got it well. Size? No. Somewhere I saw 100, no, 100 to 150 households per village. So how many households are we targeting per site? Then lastly, we have always had issues with the government agencies and the donors. We have issues with the accessibility as far as islands are concerned. And when I look at this, those who assessed also went which areas are actually more accessible. Where there is a ferry, you go with your vehicle onto a ferry, and so issue is poor access to power, but even those who are doing the assessment are also looking at where there is good access as far as movement is concerned. So can we look at the other areas where you take a boat, because there are actually people there And that's where we have out of demand. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Honorable Migade Robert. We have also Honorable Kabusa Moses.
Yes, Kalangal has two constituencies. One is represented by my big brother, Mukasa Julius Opondo, and the one I represent of the smaller and scattered islands within Lake Victoria. My concern, today we are going for a launch. You would advise me, until when should we as political leaders start talking about these things? Because, yes, the reason is, some of us political leaders lose offices for getting excited about a government program or project that is launched or commissioned and never starts. And when it is to start, still, you begin hearing about it that it started in Mayuge. So I would also want to know from the ministry, when should I start telling about my people about it? Two, I wanted to know, of course I've talked to Adela about two projects in my constituency, one in Kisava and another one in Kitobo. I don't know anything about physics or science. I don't know, are they grids, mini grids? At what state, at what level of rating are they? And the reason I ask this is, my community were even demonstrating that they were persuaded to think they are connected to power. Power that lasts 1.5 hours overnight. You know, when the sun goes, it goes off. A funny person told me that, imagine you were dating a girl, you expect her to come, and before she comes, the power is gone. So will this be a little different from what is at Chisaba and Chitobo? Then lastly is about the prices. The prices. You talked about Bunjako. I've been to Bunjako. It's not my constituency, but my fishermen do business there. And the community are saying the prices are high. And to the people who had been connected have gone back, resorted back to their rudimentary earlier before the project. May I also finally request you, Ministry and the development partners, do something urgently to save our forests. If you don't connect power to our people are cutting forests and are about now to cut the grass because the forests are done. Do something urgently. Thank you.
Chamswa, Kalangala district. We appreciate. Let's have one other MP. Yes. Our Honorable. Yes. The invitation letter I received tried to mention some villages that will benefit from this project. There is Kisuju 1 and there is Kisuju 2. So the correction I want to make, instead of Kisuju 2, it should be Kivunza. Because in my constituency there is no Kisuju 2. We only have Kisuju as a village. And they left out the biggest landing site, which is Chivunza. So I propose that you close Kisuju 2 and you add Chivunza landing site. Leave that alone. I'm just wondering, this is solar-powered energy that we are going to receive. In my constituency, Ujumba constituency, we have a project called KISS, Kalangala Infrastructure Services, which is mandated to transport us using the ferries at Masaka, and which is mandated also to provide us with clean water on Bugala Island, the biggest island of all the islands of Kalangala district, and which is mandated also to supply us with power. Initially, the KISS people told us, because by then I was
a district councillor. They told us that they're going to plant a solar system, which is going to serve us, to provide us with power during daytime and even nighttime. But currently speaking, we receive that power only during daytime. When it comes to night, they change to a generator. And they provide us power from 6 in the evening up to midnight. From midnight to morning, we have no power. And you know Uganda Island has developed with so many hotels, so many beautiful beaches. So the business is now struggling because of power. How safe are we with these mini grids that we are going to set in the islands without generator backs up and whatever? And the other issue is about the charges. For us, we are paying a lot of money per unit, 1,300 and 1,800 per unit in Kalangala. And the people are crying. So how safe are we with this wonderful project, which I welcome, but I pray that we need to make some improvement compared to the experience we have with Kalangala Infrastructure Services. Thank you. Mukasa Julius Opondo, MP Ujumba Kalangala.
Thank you so much, Honorable Mukasa. Yes, let's give him a hand clap. That's a very... We have Palorinywa and Maji, but we are also, I will dedicate this to the panel to answer the other questions. Thank you so much, all people who have given us those questions. Let me invite now the panelists to take on the questions, beginning with, I think I will start with George Bakawulindi.
Thank you so much. Good questions, challenging, but I'm glad that you asked these tough questions at this stage. I think for the question of the Honorable MP from West Nile. Well, the Palarinia in Obongi district, that is, maybe just to make something very clear. When we were designing the program, we were asked similar questions regarding where are we looking at refugee settlements and what's the conflict between supporting the refugees and the host communities. You know, it was something that eventually was easy to respond to, because the mini grids that will be in these areas are actually going to be installed in the host communities, where the refugee settlements are surrounding. So it's going to benefit the host communities and the refugees as well. But for the sustainability of the mini grid infrastructure, we couldn't install it in the open refugee areas, because if, for example, the crisis or the conflicts at home ended, then you have a case where you have stranded infrastructure. So it's really all the initiatives are around host communities. And if you look at Palorinia, the northern part of that area is predominantly Ugandan communities. There are no refugees there, and there are mini grids planned for those villages. We were there. And then as you move further south, you have a mixture of refugee settlements and a lot of host communities as well. So that's going to be, that's the criteria that we use. There's a big market in Palarinia, and that's likely to get its own mini grid. It's been there for a long time. So it's also going to be prioritized as a viable installation. There was a question regarding Obongi district headquarters not being connected, and that's a very good question. When we were doing the surveys of those areas, the district, Obongi district, we realized, and this we weren't working alone, we were working with the government and the agencies for rural electrification, and it was clear that Obongi district headquarters could not be electrified using a mini grid. it requires grid electrification. Mini grid would not be adequate to provide to support the load, potential load in that area. And as you look at the way it's structured on the map, Obongi district comes further south, out of range of the host communities in the north. So that is going to have its own electrification program specific to the district headquarters. And the electrification of district headquarters is an initiative of government, so it is going to be prioritized under grid extension to be electrified. It's unfortunate that it's not electrified yet, but I think we are sure that it will eventually be electrified under the wider electrification efforts of the government. When it comes to the grid extension to Arua and the status of that and how this program fits into that wider extension of the grid to Arua, there's a separate program that is working on that, funded by the World Bank and KfW. I think there's a link from Gulu to Agago that's funded by KfW, and there's another one that goes all the way to Arua, transmission lines that have been funded by other partners. Arua is, of course, much bigger. So again, we are not looking at taking mini grids to that. Bear in mind, again, that the master plan for electrification that was developed by the government in 2019 identified grid extension sites where the grid should go, and also mini grid sites that were too remote for the main grid to go, at least not in 10 years. And our program focused on the mini grid sites. There are many other programs that are working on grid extension using the main grid. But we are focusing on those remote areas that have no chance of getting electricity using the main grid in the medium term. I think I tried. Thank you very much.
Adela, yes, the panel can proceed, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just to supplement on what Geoffrey said, I think since we have limited time, I'll invite the honorable member to come maybe, or we pay you a visit at the parliament so we can discuss more on the villages, because there are some electrification programs that are coming within your area, and you're aware of some of these. On to the question of land acquisition, so without giving away too much, because we still want you to read the procurement documents when they come, the land acquisition will be done by the developer, but there will be support from the government, because the government intends to lower the cost of the project by identifying some of the government-owned land sites, but the cost of land acquisition will be on the developer. So it's something that you need to include in your financial model when you're planning. But all this will be given in the procurement documents. And there was a question from KIL still on the limitations on the capacities. What are the limitations of the capacities? We're not limiting you because you're the experts. We want you to tell us, if I'm giving you this village, what solution are you going to design for me? The least cost solution that you're going to design for me that's solar based. So obviously, as a planner, you need to know that when you're sizing your equipment, you have to plan for the next few years. You don't just plan for the demand now. You have to incorporate maybe a growth factor.
Yes, let me ask the panel to allow me take the recognition of the arrival of our PS. Yes, you're welcome, Madam. You're welcome, Mr.
The project area, what do you do about the areas that are outside the project area? We need to check in our electrification plans, but also we have initiatives where we have unsolicited tenders. As KIL, if you have won a concession within your area, but then you feel that there are areas beyond that you need to electrify, then you would have to, of course, approach us on that. Who is the expert on economics? There's a question on return on investment in terms of money. That was from Patrick, GIS. Anyone willing to take that, or should I try? Okay. Okay, so I'll let Geoffrey take that. And there was something on what do local companies with no experience do. I'll also let Geoffrey take that. Sorry, I'm just rushing through the questions to see what I can answer.
About providing electricity. It's about economic empowerment, fostering sustainable development, and enhancing the quality of life for remote rural communities far from the grid. Mini grids, although we call them mini grids, I keep saying they are strong grids. Mini grids offer a lifeline to rural communities by providing them with access to reliable energy or electricity. We continue to work on the aspect of affordability because we continue to grapple with slightly higher tariffs for the mini grids, and with the support of our partners, we've continued to subsidize the power tariffs to ensure that the remote areas can also access affordable energy. So we want to thank our partners in this endeavor. In areas where the traditional grid extensions are often impractical or cost prohibitive, mini grids emerge as a pragmatic solution, ensuring that households, businesses, and public institutions have a consistent and dependable source of power. And in our energy policy of 2023, we have augmented the role of mini grids, and there are 4 off-grid solutions. We foresee off-grid solutions contributing to 40% of our access to our target of universal access. So this Get Access project fits very well within our energy policy ambitions. And like I keep saying, the energy policy is only as good as the action on ground. Having a good document is not enough. We must see it on ground. We must see communities being transformed. So the scaling up of mini grids has the potential to be a game changer for small and medium-sized enterprises in rural areas. So access to electricity, like you already know, facilitates the growth of businesses, from small shops to agricultural ventures, and this in turn stimulates economic activity, generates employment opportunities, and contributes to poverty alleviation. I happen to have visited one of the privately developed mini grids in Namayingo, Lolwe Island, and I was pleasantly impressed by the impact that 600 kilowatt mini grid developed by Equatorial Energy was having on the community, the fishing community, and then the proactive approach to productive use of energy that the company had deployed. And that was testament of what we can do, equally in Lamo and some other mini grids in Kasese. So reliable access to energy can act as a catalyst for entrepreneurship in rural areas. With power readily available, individuals are more likely to venture to different entrepreneurial opportunities. And that's what the Get Access project is all about. The Get Access Uganda Mini Grid project carries a noble mission at its core: the sustainable improvement in the supply of remote rural regions with climate-friendly, renewable energy. It also fits in very well with our energy transition plan that we'll be launching at COP28. So in recognizing the profound impact that access to reliable and affordable energy can have on communities, we are not merely launching a project today. This is not just another project. This is a transformational project, and I want to thank KfW and the EU for this support. Thank you, and we are cognizant that as we deploy these mini grids, there are definitely some challenges. And I'm glad when I walked in, you were having a discourse on some of these challenges, and together we'll continue addressing them from time to time. We are aware that one of the primary challenges facing mini grid developers is achieving financial viability. The initial capital investment required for setting up mini grids, especially in remote areas, can be substantial, and the return on investment may take several years. So we therefore encourage public-private partnerships, where we leverage from the strength of the private sector, but also the opportunities that come from the public sector. And we've done this even for the Lolwe mini grid, where we came in as the government to support with the distribution network to enable the viability of that mini grid. In addition, for the operation period, we've committed to support in extraordinary maintenance of the mini grid, where we come in as the Ministry of Energy to replace transformers so that the project remains viable for the investor. So we do encourage public-private partnerships, such as the ones we are doing, but also specifically on the Get Access project. We are aware of the challenge of affordability, and the members of parliament here, time and again, when we are interfacing with the committees of parliament, they do raise a question on equitable distribution of power in terms of cost. They say, why would the mini grids in Lamo be so expensive compared to the national grid? And then we have to elaborate and sometimes help them appreciate that maybe sometimes expensive power might be better than no power. So we come in and we continue to work on bringing down these tariffs. So we'll continue working together to ensure that these mini grids become more affordable. We are also aware of another challenge on the government side that we continue to work on. We have heard from the private sector on long approval processes, elaborate project authorizations that take a bit of time. Sometimes we do interface with the private sector and they are frustrated. We are working on streamlining our processes. We will continue to ensure we support you better. And when it comes to mini grids specifically, we have earmarked an entire department of renewable energy in the Ministry of Energy to be the focal point for deployment of mini grids. So we believe with that focus and coordination will provide better support. And we are working with the Electricity Regulatory Authority so that we also quicken the permitting process, the licensing process, where they are already doing very well and will continue to improve. So we commit to support the private sector better. I believe Ricardo must be somewhere. Many times we've had that conversation on quick approvals, and we will ensure that. So ladies and gentlemen, I know that there was an earlier speech on this project scope, but I will reiterate the project scope. Under the Get Access project, we aim to electrify approximately 100 to 150 small and medium-sized villages, connecting over 150,000 people in the remote areas of Uganda through decentralized off-grid solar-powered mini-grids. This is significant. When you hear 150,000 people, you might not understand the enormity of the project. Just to paint a picture, today, when you look at our electrification rate, we are at 57%. We must drive our electrification to universal access 100%. So any number that we put into that category, the remaining 43%, for us, it is always beneficial and it's a drive towards our targets. And we have a few other projects where we are electrifying, and you find that within a period of 5 years, we are electrifying about 1 million, or we are making 1 million connections. So this 150,000 people is enormous. It's an enormous contribution to our targets for universal access. I believe the earlier speaker must have also elaborated the coverage in terms of scope, but again, I will mention it. We do have a number of beneficiary districts, especially for my area members of parliament, so that we go and talk about this in these areas. We do have beneficiaries from Kalangala. It is an island on Lake Victoria, not far off from here. And we believe that will go a long way to stimulate development on the island. There's already some work we are doing, getting a sea cable there, but this is complementary to those efforts. We've been running diesel generators on this island for some time. So by deploying these mini-grids, we will displace these diesel generators, reduce on emissions, and contribute to our clean energy agenda.